Hello and welcome, fearless writers. For those of you that are new, my name is Barrett Laurie, and I'm not only fabulous, but I run this channel. This interview series is meant to connect my audience with authors and author entrepreneurs via a discussion-based format. The first half of the interview is mine, my questions and my time, and in the middle, we'll have a short rapid-fire questions section. We'll end with questions from the audience. I ask you to denote any questions with a Q. The difference in this episode is going to be that we're not going to be live with you, so we can't answer you directly, but I encourage you to follow my guest, Robin Castle, on Twitter and Instagram at RobinCastle55 to continue your discussion with her there. Today's guest is Robin Castle. She is the witty author of Don't Drink the Bathroom Water, A Guide to Living in Ireland. Robin has lived in Ireland for the last 7 years and shares her daily adventures with her followers across her social media platforms. We met through Instagram and became fast friends, which is easy to do for anyone who follows Robin's accounts because she is a welcoming force in the writing community. Robin has been published in Chicken Soup for the Soul, Phoenix Magazine, Adoption Today, Indiana Gardener, and other publications. She not only writes guides to Ireland, but she's branching out into murder mysteries, and I am so here for it. Without further delay, let me introduce my guest, the one and only Robin Castle. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Barrett. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. Welcome. I am going to give you just a second to introduce yourself to everyone and tell everybody whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Ooh, okay. I like pineapple. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Robin Castle. I'm the author of Don't Drink the Bathroom Water, which is a guide to living in Ireland. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. In a former life, I had a research company and was a clinical researcher, which sounds antithetical to writing, and yet murder mystery, it really melds together well. I live in Ireland with my family. We've lived here for actually just over 7 years now. Let's get started.
Wonderful. Well, that kind of is where we're going to start off. So you relocated to Ireland 7 years ago. What brought that on? Like that's a pretty big change. So
it was a hailstorm.
So talk to me about it.
So my husband was fortunate in that at work, they one day said, okay, we need you to go to Ireland. And we were up for it. The whole family was up for it. So that was kind of a good thing. It wasn't, nobody was worried or anything, but we made assumptions. And we made, so many assumptions. We assumed, they speak English. We speak English, we'll be fine. We're originally from America. I'm sure that comes through my accent. And even now, I have lost nothing of my American accent all this time. But things are a little different. The title. And, we were not familiar. We thought an Irish accent was kind of the accent of TV and movies that you hear in America. No, it's not. Actually, that's considered very offensive, by the way. Very offensive. And language isn't used the same way. And if you use it the way that maybe you've heard on TV with an Irish accent, don't do that. Don't do that. Whole chapter on language.
That's important in the book. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We made a lot of mistakes, Barrett. We made so many mistakes. We were so excited and well-intended, and they were never mistakes from disrespect. But a lot of times, just from moving here very quickly and not having a great chance to prepare, we were just ignorant. That's how it is. We were ignorant. And there are some things that are small, medium, and large that would have helped us. And I detail all those things in the book. This book is like a love letter from me to you and from me to Ireland, because wow, the Irish people were very patient with us.
Well, I just wrote my review. It'll probably go up in like a day or two on Amazon. You know how those take a day or whatever?
Thank you.
My description for it, my little headline was, if you're looking for a travel guide for dummies with heart. Like it was funny and fun, and it didn't feel like a guide. You know what I mean? You know how some of those are kind of dry, or
Yes.
You know what I mean? So
Yes.
my husband and I often buy the out guides just for safety in certain countries.
Absolutely.
But they read like a text. I mean, I was headed for a PhD, was going to teach in college. So that was my background before I landed here. But even I didn't like reading. You know what I mean?
No.
Like it's just like, but this is fun read. Like I would tell people, it's one you kind of don't want to put down, and your humor comes through. The humor that you have on Instagram and stuff really jumps off the page.
I love that. Thank you very much, because
I just wanted to tell you that's my takeaway. If I were telling people, it's a very approachable, and it's a guide that's fun. Where oftentimes they're not, or they're kind of like I said, textbook like. where this is fun and readable. It's like talking to a friend about like,
Yeah.
like you won't believe this kind of a thing. And it's through like storytelling. It really is the storytelling part. So anyway, that was my takeaway.
Thank you, Barrett. That makes me so happy because, we had the Foder's Guide and the Lonely Planet Guide when we moved here.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And one of my takeaways was, and this has kind of changed me forever, the Foder's Guide, my takeaway was you were in Ireland for 2 weeks and not a day more and stayed in a hotel. And then you wrote this guide. Like, guarantee. There's no doubt in my mind. Lonely Planet was slightly better. It's like maybe they went to 3 hotels. But like, I can really tell they did not stay in a house. And there's more difference in Ireland between like a house and a hotel than I could even explain in like an hour.
Right.
So I wrote about like, hey, and even this is not the whole story, but it's a good start. It'll keep you safe.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. We've kind of talked about moving overseas. What was the toughest part? What was the, and other than the social stuff, like the actual logistics of them, because I can't imagine you all had kids, I'm assuming, that you took with you. So talk to me about like uprooting your kids out of school and taking them to another country. Like that had to be a big deal.
School is exactly what I was going to say. School was challenging because we weren't aware of, and we should have been, and had we had more time, we would have been, but there's a very fixed system of education here in Ireland, and it's based heavily around the Leaving Cert, which is a big set of exams that you have to take to get into university. And my children are older. I have a whole chapter on education that will really help. So here's the thing. My children were high school age, and we had to make some decisions. Could we even get them into a high school? High schools here are kind of first come, first serve, and there's not a lot of open spaces. So it's hard to get into a high school anywhere in the country, and you're not guaranteed a spot in your local area, first of all. And second of all, they're not necessarily happy to see you mid-course or mid-time because they want all the children in the school to do well on the Leaving Cert exams because that makes the school look better. So there were some extra hurdles that we were so naive about and that we thought, we could kind of, we'll talk to the nice people and get in and it'll be great. And the people were like, no, keep your smelly children out. And it was just that we were coming late is all it was.
Okay. So it was it's more the timing than necessarily the being American or whatever.
Definitely that. They didn't care that we were American. Okay. It was the timing and it was the lack of available spots, right? Okay. So to get into school in general in Ireland is not necessarily easy.
Gotcha. Interesting. Mm-hmm. So what 3 talents do you think you possess that might surprise anyone who's read your book?
Number 1, perfect pitch. I have really, really perfect pitch. Number 2, I am very adaptable. We've moved a lot, just like from my husband's employment and my employment and education. I have a PhD, a research PhD. And I'm always afraid when I tell people that, they're going to think, oh, she's boring. So that's like a secret.
Yeah, there's nothing boring about you. I get no more joy than when I see you've done one of those, what are they called, reels? Or where you do the lives, or where you talk video on Instagram. This is how old I am and techie, not savvy. But when I see your videos on Instagram, your energy is infectious. Yes, far from boring.
Thank you. And language, I can pick up a foreign language pretty quickly. I'm just one of those people, I can't draw. I have no auditory memory, but language I can get. So that's been a nice skill too for travel.
So talk to me a little bit about your creative roots. Have you always been a writer? Did you always intend to write? And have you always been a content creator? Because I would put you in that category too, based on what I see on Instagram. I think you're a content creator.
Wow, thank you. This is very good for my ego. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I began writing, purposefully writing when I was 9 years old. I wrote my first murder mystery. So in a way, I'm coming back to my roots. The murder weapon was cocaine. I had an interesting childhood.
Wow.
I was 9.
I would love to read that story.
It's actually kind of good.
I'm curious.
Yeah. So, but then I was one of those people who had these ideas, you know, that I had to have a job and I had to go to school and do other things. And I don't know why I was so locked into that. I see a lot of people, especially like younger people now, who are so much more free and able to be creative. And maybe YouTube has helped that somewhat. But I'm a little jealous, frankly. I wish I had started earlier, but I've always written. I have always written. I just have never taken it as seriously and been as focused on it as I am now.
With regards to the PhD, because for folks who've gone through a strenuous graduate program, I'd done 2 and then was getting ready for a PhD, so I know that grind. I want to explain to people, writing for yourself or even nonfiction is so different than a thesis, for me at least, or any of that kind of work, just because it's one of them is for myself, and the thesis was ultimately to finish. So like, I want to express to people, like, don't assume that just because someone has a master's or a PhD, like, oh, they love writing and writing for that it's totally different, because there's so much more pressure and like, or at least my experience. So what was it like for you?
My PhD is in statistics.
Really? That's amazing.
And I run a clinical research firm, which nothing, like, they're so completely opposite.
So let's transition a little bit to the book. So don't drink the bathroom water. So I love the blurb. I'm going to read it for folks who are not familiar with it. Put it up there. I'm going to give you the full screen so you can show it off while I read. The blurb on the back, which I love, was, it's a humorous first-person account of relocating to the Emerald Isle and all the hijinks that followed, with tips, tricks, insider information, and a glossary to prevent you from making the same mistakes. She made the mistakes so you don't have to. First of all, I love the blurb. This was not meant to be a question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. Did you write, was that like your brainchild?
Yes, it was.
That was so well done. Killer blurb. Love it. So we kind of talked about what inspired it. Was it the move once you got there, you thought to yourself, I can do this better? And I have a kind of a better way to do this. Would you consider it for anywhere else? Like, for instance, if you all were to relocate to somewhere, I don't know what your husband's job would be, but let's say he were relocated to Greece. Would you consider, one for Greece, or, continuing the guides?
I would. But the main reason that I wrote this book was almost a sense of apology. I respect the humanity, and I hope that really comes through in the book. I really respect the humanity of the Irish people at large. As a culture. They are much more humane. When we first arrived here, there was a homeless man eating at McDonald's, and someone a security guard at the mall did ask him to leave and tried to remove the homeless man. And there was a national outcry.
Wow.
And I was touched, to the bottom of my soul. I was touched that would be. Is Ireland perfect? Of course it's not. Nowhere's perfect. Sure. I do talk about, there are some challenges living in Ireland even today, and even more so in the pandemic. And I talk about those in the book. Yeah. But I wanted to help people who come into Ireland know what to expect, understand that they're dealing with just an awesome culture and a kinder, gentler people. The Irish are in every way, in every scenario, a kinder, gentler people, and perhaps a more civil people than I was familiar with. And I stand by that. And I wanted, when people come in as tourists, all of us are a little unplugged on vacation. That's normal, and that's okay. But I just wanted people to be a little nicer to the Irish people, and to kind of understand why an Irish person might be reacting the way that they are, or why they might say what they've said, and what that really means. Because there is a lot of that here, where, just like in the American South, if someone says, bless your heart, they're not necessarily being nice to you, honey. They might be wishing you dead.
But out of curiosity, what would you think that most Americans might get wrong about Ireland? Or you know what I mean? Like, what, for someone who maybe hadn't read your book, what might they get wrong?
Oh, I can tell you very easily.
Yes.
Very, very easily. And this is kind of a big one. Friends, Pubs are not for getting drunk. And this is a huge cultural misunderstanding that I understand. You see a lot of that in movies, especially.
Yeah.
But that's a no-no. Pubs in Ireland generally, of course there are exceptions, but generally are more like a community center. It's a place that might have a back room where people go and celebrate first communions or christenings or birthdays. It's a place where people come together to watch sport and to have a sense of camaraderie. It's a social place, and it's a social place for everyone. Like, kids are welcomed in most pubs. A bar in Ireland doesn't serve food and is more a place for drinking, and it's not a place to bring your family or your children, right? That's a bar. But a pub, in many villages, you'll see nothing but maybe a grocery and a pub. And the pub is that important. And it makes it seem, sometimes people walk away, people from outside Ireland walk away and go, oh my God, drinking is so important. We got to have a grocery store, but we got to have booze. In Europe, housing is small, right? In general. So you don't necessarily have people over to your house as much. That's not exactly how socializing works. A lot of times you'll meet at the pub, have a cup of tea even. Like, the pub is not always about drinking. I cannot put a fine enough point on that, by the way.
I love that. That's a great one. Hey, talk to me a little bit about the process of writing this book. So how long did it take you to get it together?
I wrote it chapter by chapter. I made a big list, and it was big. It's still big, of all the kind of major points that tripped me up in the beginning, the major points I thought would really be helpful for anyone coming to Ireland, a tourist, anyone, a business person, and some kind of just interesting things. I wanted to convey the culture, a sense of the culture, a sense of the people. So those were my main objectives. I wrote a chapter list. And because it's nonfiction, it's kind of easier and faster. No, not kind of. It is. It's just easier and faster.
So it is a similar plotting style then, at least as far as like you kind of have a structure for where you're headed.
Absolutely.
Okay, interest. And then, so how do you achieve that voice? Of course, I'm not asking you your narrative voice because that's you, but the kind of fun, I guess what I'm asking, were your beta readers, or was it an editor? Was there someone that kind of helped you say, I need a little more Robin here, or this needs a joke, or, you know what I'm saying? How did you find that balance of like information and fun? Like, how did that come about?
It's all me. It's all me entirely. But it was also like my intention from the beginning, because, I've read the Voter's Guide to Ireland, and it is at times a little thou shalt not. And I don't know the point of that. Like, I don't kind of get that. I wanted it to bring people in. I wanted to say, come on, friend, we're going on an adventure. And I wanted to help people. That was really the core, is that I wanted to help people in both Ireland and in America. And the only way I can help people in Ireland, in the wonderful, welcoming, kind country of Ireland, is to help other people understand the culture of Ireland, the beauty of the Irish people, and a few little tricks to help them be kind of sensitive to that.
If you were telling an author who is saying, I'm going to try my hand at nonfiction, what would be your advice to them about what you learned in publishing this book?
Stay organized. Structure, I think, is potentially more important in nonfiction, because structure is all you have, right? You don't really have characters that you can rest on. You don't really have like a complex plot or like subplots. You have your structure, you have your organization, stay with it. Organization is critically important in nonfiction.
Were there any points where you hit a spot where you thought, will I be able to push through, or did you hit a block at all in writing this, or was it pretty smooth sailing for you?
Smooth sailing.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm a little jealous of that, I'm going to admit. So about 6 months ago, or I think it was 6 months, you can correct me on my timeline, around the first of the year, I remember kind of seeing some rumblings on your Instagram that you were dipping your toe in the fiction pond, and you were thinking about some mysteries. And I think you even started talking about maybe some books that you were reading at the time. Like, I kind of even picked one up that, you were kind of recommending to folks. So where did the shift to mystery fiction come? You kind of teased that it was your roots of your writing. So kind of give us where did this come from? I'm
a mystery lover, and I'm a long time mystery lover, but I had mixed feelings about mysteries. Sometimes mystery as a genre can be very narrow and can be rather exclusive more than inclusive. And I'm very uncomfortable with that, right? So I wanted a mystery that looked more like my real life, okay? And that had kind of the characters in my real life. And that was something that could happen. I wanted it to be very grounded in reality. Because while I love a mystery that occurs while we're on an archaeology dig in Egypt as much as anyone, it is not entirely relatable.
Right.
And that's fine. There's a place for everything. Absolutely. There's a place for everything. But I also felt, and you should never politicize your book. So I've made a huge mistake. I have a transgender character because I wanted to show that transgender people are that second word.
Yeah.
It's not transgender people, it's transgender people, right? As much as any of us. We all have our descriptors, right? But at the end, it's people.
Right.
So her name is Tioga. She's a fabulous character. She's my favorite character in the book. I wanted to make sure this character is based on someone in my life who has since passed and unfortunately could not read this and give their opinion. So I wanted to make sure it was a respectful tribute. And I had several wonderful, generous, kind, brilliant sensitivity readers who came in and read my book, and all they did, and they're members of the transgender community, right? And all they did, their whole job was not to say, setting, word choice, whatever. No, it was just to look at the character of Tioga, her interactions with other characters. What does she say? How is she presented? How is she described? And I will tell you something, Barrett. We think we know, don't we? I thought I was sensitive. Oh, yes, I did indeed.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I heard, I had described Tioga. I thought it was clever not to name her as a trans woman, okay? I just wanted to describe her the way that I described everyone else, right? So hair color, I mentioned she had an Adam's apple, but I was taken to task for the Adam's apple. That is offensive, friends. That is offensive. And this is why I encourage everyone, use a sensitivity reader. And there was no punishment. There was no criticism of me. This wasn't uncomfortable. Actually, quite the opposite. This was kind of wonderful. Yeah. So I corrected that. And they said that they would like her named, that was kind of an important thing in the community to establish that she is absolutely transgender. And so I included that. Easy enough. These are the simplest, smallest changes, but they mean the world to people, And this is a way of conveying my actual intention, which is respect.
There's some problematic tropes with LGBT characters, but specifically trans characters. So I really appreciate you making sure they're three-dimensional and going the extra step to find sensitivity readers. And this isn't kind of to pat you on the back as much as it is to nudge people watching this.
Absolutely. It's a very important step, and it's not scary and it's not hard. I mean, there was nothing unpleasant about this or difficult, and It was kind of joyous because two people told me that Tioga was also their favorite character.
Okay, so we've kind of talked about the inspiration, and we talked a little bit about the writing process from before. How has the writing process for this been different for you than the other book? Like, what does that look like?
Oh, okay. This book, I can't find the camera. There you go. This book I wrote in under a year. No, probably a year. Okay. Yeah. Front to back, a couple drafts, polishing, beta readers, alpha reader. I like alpha readers and beta readers. I'm one of those people. So that was easy. I've been writing this murder mystery since 2016. And should I admit, it's the 10th draft. Is that a good idea? No, don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. That's not a good idea. The mistake I made, and it's okay because I have learned, and I've really learned something here. So that's kind of a gift. But I didn't show this to other people early enough, and I wish I had, right? So I had some family members just casually read through, and that's cute, but that's not an alpha reader or a beta reader, and never confuse that. Loved ones reading your work are always going to pat you on the back, and that's okay. That's what they're there for. They're loved ones. They're not, unless they're published authors, they're just loved ones, and even then, they're gonna be nice to you. Mm-hmm. So then I distributed my book to some readers who brought up some really good problems. And one of the problems they brought up, this is a murder mystery, was the timeline. And friends, that's not a forgivable problem, right? So I had to go back and rewrite the book. And that's part of why it's a 10th draft. And I have not worked on it every day for, all these years. No, I have not. I've also written other projects, including Don't Drink the Bathroom Water.
Yes.
But I've worked on it a lot. Hey.
Yeah,
and I've learned a lot.
So what has that time given you? Like, for instance, and don't on the drafts. I had 8 before I cleared.
Thank you, Barrett. Thank you.
I love a good draft. So,
There's a little bit of a theme in the book about what we worship culturally, right? Money, fame, especially fame. Mm-hmm. And there's a little talk about that. There's also, my main character is also in a lower socioeconomic group. And one of my pet peeves, having grown up Poe is P-O. That's when you hope one day to be poor, okay?
That's the last two.
Yeah, a time in my life, we were Poe. Like, we had peanut butter and jelly or grilled cheese sandwiches. That was dinner for the foreseeable future. Like, I hate the romanticization of poverty. I really don't like that in mass media. Sure. So I wanted to give her respect for all her efforts and all her hard work in trying to support herself, right? Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to show a lot of aspects I don't see people talking about or see in media about poverty, a lot of reality.
Tell me this, what was the toughest thing? So in every book, and something there are very few people in here that are non-writers, but I do have some Crohn's people who are not writers who may not understand this, but in every book, there is something that we cut called our darlings, but even more than your darlings, there's just a point of writing that is a necessary evil and truth, that is, you must cut. So what was the toughest thing to cut? Can you spot the thing that is the hardest thing for you to cut? What was it?
I have to cut. I had this day, Harrietu Day. Harrietu is the city where the story takes place. And I wanted to have Harrietu Day and talk about the founding of the city because it has this nice backstory in my head. And I wanted to celebrate it and show my main character reacting. And it does not in any way relate to the plot. It doesn't advance the story. I love it with my whole heart and soul. It's a whole chapter I'm going to have to cut. And I haven't cut it yet because it is really my darling. Right. It is sort of a wonderful mythical city that respects everyone. And anyway, it's going to have to go.
Oh. And I feel that pain for you. I really do. And people watching this like, what? Like my husband, for example, not a writer. Like when I have to cut something, and I'll be like, big deal. Or I had to kill a character in this thing I'm working on now. And so I had this whole thing about it. And he goes, so don't kill him.
Who cares?
He goes, don't kill him. And I said, but if I don't kill him, then the story doesn't, I have to for the story to progress. And he's like, but do you have to? I was like, yes, that's actually what has to happen. So I get that people don't get. We've done the what's tough to cut. So now tell me, what was the most difficult to write? Like when you're sitting down to do the art of the writing itself, what scene brought up some things in you that surprised you?
That is such a good question. What brought up things that surprised me? There's a little bit of, no, this is not a spoiler. I want to be so careful not to give spoilers, but
me too.
There's a little bit of domestic violence in the story that is seen through kind of like flashback. And, I wanted to get that right. And I wanted that to not overwhelm the story, not bog down the story, but I also wanted it to convey something that matters. And I wanted it to be there for a very important reason, because I'm not trying to bring you down. I'm also really not trying to, again, romanticize, or I'm not trying to take an easy way out. That wasn't the point of it at all. So it was very hard to write well, and to write in a way that showed that it was like action completed in the past. That was really hard. I wanted it to appear more like a memory, is exactly what I should have said, and not like it was yesterday or recent. And that was very challenging.
I wanted to ask you, I noticed on your blog, so for those that have not been to Robin's website, it is her name, robincastle.net. be sure and check that out. There are some great blogs on there, but one that you wrote back in January jumped out at me because we are on the same hamster wheel, or about to be, which is that you were thinking about going the traditional publishing route with this book.
The hamster wheel is exactly right.
But so talk to me a little bit about that decision, because it's a big one, to say which way am I going to go? And I think, again, for folks that aren't writers or in the writing community, the difference between being able to self-pub and trad-pub is with trad-pub, you really are at the mercy of someone else, a gatekeeper in the form of an agent, and then another gatekeeper in the form of an editor, because the agent is just the first mountain to climb. Then you have the submission process. Making that decision, what was that like? What did you kind of go through to get to that place? What made you say, this one, I want to go another route?
Okay. So I have always in recent times wanted to be a hybrid author. I love self-publishing. I think sometimes there's some not necessarily accurate depiction of self-publishing. I did not find it super hard. Now, that being said, I went through KDP, right? And I went through Ingram Spark. And so in many ways, they facilitate the process, right? And then I just have to publicize it myself. And I had to, get the cover done myself and things like that. But I did not find that process to be onerous or overly difficult. And there are tons of people offering advice about that, even on Instagram, but also on YouTube. And, you can hire people if you're so motivated. But why would I want to be a hybrid author? Here's why, friends. Because I want the best of all worlds. I want, if it's possible, if I can get traditionally published, then I have access to all their marketing and all their publicity and things like that, right? And then, I get the benefit of that and make no money. Let's be clear.
Oh, totally. None of us are getting
any money, honey. And then I write my own books that I publish, and then I can make 50 cents a book. You know what I mean? People will be surprised. It is about 50 cents a book too.
Oh, wow. Is it really?
I mean, we're not going to get rich, but it's the joy of it. It's the fun of it. And and I just feel really good about that. There's some part of that feels very organic and natural and right for me right now. That's a comfortable decision for me right now. Sure. Sometimes on Instagram in the writing community, you can see a little, I don't know if there's friction or misunderstanding. I'm not sure. It confuses me because I don't feel any kind of way. If someone decides self-publishing is what they want to do, I have great respect for that. Yeah. And I often wonder, when you self-publish, you can be more creative. You can go farther. You can explore the bounds. Sometimes I think, that's going to be a really interesting book. When you traditionally publish, you have to, no matter what kind of book it is, in the end, you are writing to market because the literary agent and the editor, as you said, are only going to buy and represent what will sell. And that is not necessarily the best book. And that is not necessarily even a great book, right? That's unfortunate, but that's the truth.
I read many a year that are not, in fact, that are traditional, that are not back.
I could name names. Let's not do that now, but later we'll have some coffee and we'll name some names. Exactly. But I don't care. If someone is trad-pubbed, great. If someone is hybrid, great. If someone is self-pubbed, great. I respect the hustle. It's a lot of work being a writer. And I mean that sincerely. I really respect the hustle. If you produce a book, I respect you. You have worked very, very hard.
You've kind of hinted at this as the last question for this section, but I kind of want you to go into a bit more detail if you would.
Okay.
You've teased that this might be a series. So could the mystery fiction be your new normal? Is this kind of something you're hoping will be a ongoing thing for you? These stories. Go on.
So it's a kind of a three-parter. Okay. Perfect. First of all, this was originally book number 1 of a 5-part series. Book number 2 is doing business in Ireland. Book number 3 is for tourists. It's kind of an off the beaten path kind of tourist guide. But the pandemic, Ireland went down into a real lockdown where the country was closed, which was very difficult because we have an open border with our neighbor country of Northern Ireland. And there were some minutes there were some tougher times in the beginning of the pandemic in Ireland, but there were everywhere. Let's be clear about that. There were everywhere. And so I put that on the shelf and went back to my lovely murder mystery. That will definitely be a series. I'll publish it. Someone else will publish it. Who knows what will happen with that? But book 2 and 3, book 2 is already about half written, and book 3 has a concept. Book 4 has a concept. There are recurring characters from book 1, so you kind of see their growth and development and get to see them in different scenarios, especially Elise, the main character of book 1. You get to watch her grow and change a little. Grow up is what you really get to watch. Even though we meet her when she's 36. Hey, life is different for all of us. So there's that. Also, I'm always going to be multi-genre. Now, how am I going to handle that with pseudonyms? This is such a complex thing. I'm not sure. I also write speculative fiction short stories. I also write fantasy novellas. Hey, I also write articles. I write articles and I really enjoy that sometimes. I've written articles about Ireland. I've written articles about writing mystery. I've written articles, the ones that you referenced earlier too. Yeah. I used to have a gardening column.
I'm going to switch topics again on you. Are you ready for the next shift? So now we're going to move into talking about craft, the nuts and bolts of the writing. So is there a particular craft book that you swear by and that you would tell every author to check out? What would that be?
Okay, I'm going to say something super controversial. Listen, you do you, whatever you like, whatever works for you is great, because writing is hard, okay? But for me, I have always gotten more out of reading, more craft advice out of reading other fiction. Let me give you an example. So like Save the Cat. I think Save the Cat makes some very good points and is a very good explanation of 3-act structure. It's brilliant, right? Mm-hmm. Stephen King's On Writing, this idea of letting your manuscript rest before you edit it. Absolutely. I use that all the time, by the way. I find that incredibly helpful. So I certainly have benefited from craft books, and I would never say don't read them. Of course, read them. But Octavia Butler. I started reading Octavia Butler with a friend. What I have learned about writing from her. Every single time she crafts a brilliant first sentence. Every single time she has nuanced, diverse characters and a whole cast of them. There's no tokenism, by the way. I really appreciate that. Every single time she has a fresh story with fresh ideas. How she did that, because she published a lot of work. I mean, wow. I mean, she was a real career author, obviously. So I just appreciate she wrote cross genre, right? She published in fantasy. She published in sci-fi. She published essays. She published short stories. There is so much. Also, she wrote in a style that I don't think we talk enough about. We see a lot of description sometimes, right? Some authors are really good at describing characters and they do a lot of it, right? There are those writers who are like, he was 6 feet 1 inch tall. He had broad shoulders and narrow hips, and his fingers were long and his hair was blonde, but it was missing in one patch over his left ear, which had little hairs growing out of it. I mean, like, for me, that's a lot. That's just my stuff. For me, that's a lot. And I don't like to necessarily read like that, and I don't write like that. Octavia Butler says, my reader is smart. They can figure it out for themselves. They have their own ideas. Let them use them. So she is very, very, very scant with description. And I wish I had read more of that in school. I wish I had been introduced more and that they had told me why that works. Every single word. You cannot skim an Octavia Butler book. Nope, you will miss something huge. Yep. There is always something happening. The pacing is extraordinary. I mean, it's a masterclass on pacing in and of itself. And I just love it. I love that she I love that she trusts the reader. And I love that I feel trusted. And I feel like we're on a journey together, reader and writer, which I think ultimately we can talk for days about characters, pantsers, plotters, description. But that has become my new definition of good writing. When it feels like a collaborative effort, when it feels like the writer trusts you as the reader and you're going on the journey together.
Yep.
Yes.
My next question is the one that writers talk about all the time. Are you a plotter or a pantser? And what
Pantser.
You
Cancer.
are.
I tried a recovery program. I tried to become a planter, like a planter who
Yeah.
plotted like a little. No, I just don't know the story. Like the first draft is really, I'm writing it for me. A lot of people say that. And I just am that person. And I do know that it would speed up the process if I were a plotter, but I'm just not. And and I just have to accept it.
I don't think it's like a Reese's. There's no wrong way to eat it. I don't think there's anything wrong with one or the other. What I'm fascinated by, so with the mystery, do you know going in? If fancying a mystery, do you know? I mean, you know the murder, obviously, because that's probably your inciting, or
yes,
that's what's launched the story. But then, like, do you know like your twist and all of that, or does it truly just come to you as you write?
Yeah, as a murder mystery author, it would be a good idea to be a plotter, or at least a somewhat plotter. It does I'm sure I make it harder for myself than it probably needs to be. But no, I do know the inciting incident. Yes, I know the murder. And I had this idea about a book club and about what could happen if there was this murder connected to a book club and all the different interesting things that could come out of that, about books and about writing and about all sorts of little things. And I had a lot of fun with that, and it was great. But no, I didn't know how this worked out.
So tell me this, what would be your writing kryptonite?
Here's what it is, okay? And this might seem a little silly, but pressure, too restrictive of a deadline, which is going to be great for a writing career. Hey, I don't, pressure is like, I write daily, but I have a little freedom in my writing in that I work on multiple projects. I'm one of those people who generally is drafting one, editing one, polishing one, or some variety. So I'm not drafting 6 different projects, although currently I am drafting 2. What a good idea. I just have so many ideas. The pandemic.
The idea thing, I feel you. My husband says that all. He calls me shiny idea because he's like, you always have a shiny idea. And I do every day. I'm like, I got a new idea. And he's like, you haven't finished the last 4. And I'm like, yeah, that's okay.
Oh my God. Yeah. That I so relate to that. I think my husband and your husband could commiserate. Probably. But the pandemic, for some people, I know the pandemic has kind of like dried up the well, if you will, the source where the writing comes from. But for me, somehow the pandemic has opened the floodgates, and that's been kind of fun. That's kind of a gift, I think, in the pandemic to have more ideas and work on more projects. And so I'm writing a fantasy novella about a magical greenhouse that is completely and in every way unrelated to the murder mystery. The murder mystery is in edits. It's actually in polish right now, so it's the closest to being out. It'll be queried. My idea was to query it by the end of the year, and I think I'm right on track for that.
Good. And I'll give you my email if I can help you in any way, or if you want a second set of eyes on query stuff, you email it to me, and I will give you a look-see and give you all my best advices I can give.
Thank you. I will take you up on that completely. Thank you. Yes. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I appreciate that. And so while I'm working on all these projects, my friend at Have a Cup of Johanny on Instagram, Joa, and I have decided to start a podcast because isn't that what you do in the pandemic? Yes. It is a dream, Barrett. If it weren't for the pandemic, I probably wouldn't have done this. So this is kind of a pandemic gift, if we can call it that. And I kind of love it. I didn't expect to love it, but I do. So what this is Joa and I are strangers, okay? Mm-hmm. We just met like very briefly. We sort of followed each other on Instagram, but we're in the same universe, the writing community. So we're getting to know each other through books. So each week we read a book and we discuss the book. No spoilers, absolutely no spoilers. And then in that way we ask each other questions, and it's about 25 minutes long. So it's a shorter podcast. It's every Sunday. And we're reading widely. We're reading some romance, which I've never read before. We're reading Octavia Butler. We're reading mystery. We're reading all the good stuff.
So are these out? Can people listen to them already?
Yes. On Spotify, on Anchor. You can look us up on Instagram. We're Robin and Joa, at Robin and Joa. Okay. On Instagram, Joa is Joa.
Okay, and for folks watching this, I'm going to get links to all of this and put it in the description box below so that you can find the podcast. I did not even know about it. I love the idea of that. What a great way to get to know someone through books. That's brilliant.
It's super fun. Yeah. And it's kind of a wonderful, relaxed way to get to know someone who's totally a stranger. You know, we have never met in person. And she lives in America, is from the Dominican Republic.
Mm.
And I live in Ireland and I'm from America. And it's just, she's younger. She's young. I'm old. I'm the oldie vote. And it's just super fun. It's great. And we're both passionate about books, but not necessarily in the same way. She writes middle grade and YA, right up your alley. And it's just a thrill. It's a delight. It's an absolute delight. Every time we finish an episode, I'm almost sad because I'm having so much fun. I just want it to continue on forever. But we stick to about 25 to 28 minutes. Yeah. So that's the length maybe of your commute for those who are commuting, the length of a good walk, things like that. So
I cannot wait to check those out. How has publishing your first book affected your work on these books now that you're going trad pub? Like, what's the difference in how you're approaching this next step? Because I'm assuming there are some differences. So take it away. What does that look like?
The learning curve, as you well know, is steep. And there's so much pressure, you know, to write a good query letter, to figure out who's the best agent, not just in your genre, but kind of in your subgenre, and even in some themes in your book, who would really meld with that. Who is an agent who seems like hungry, like they're really working hard for their clients? Who's an agent who seems like they're really interested? Because I've seen some agents who seem almost like they don't want more queries. And I'm like, oh, yay, let's be frustrated. And I've also had to, I'll tell you the truth, Barrett, I've had to do some self-reflection and some reckoning. It's a little, who do I think I am? So when I look at agents, I thought, oh, my murder mystery is a little like Tana French. So let me see who her agent is. Maybe that's a good fit. And I didn't mean that in an ego way. That wasn't ego at all. It was kind of me being clueless and just trying to find out who was publishing mystery, because mystery, there aren't as many literary agents for mystery as there are, especially traditional mystery, as there are for other genres. So it is a little trickier. Oh, let me just look up Tana French. Ooh, Darcy Agency. Where's that? It's in Britain. Oh, they represent like, oh my God, Lee Child. They represent like a big fancy agency. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, that's not for me. And my husband said, why is that not for you? And I had to this was a moment where I really had to sit with this. And it's cute to go, okay, I'm going to query and here's a list of agents and blah, blah, blah. I have found making the list of agents that I'm going to query, because I'm trying to do like ABC thing, you know, to be the most challenging part of this whole process. How about that?
You know what? That's fair. I mean, that's a hard part. And it's not cheap to do the research, right? I mean, because Publishers Marketplace, you're spending a couple $100 a year to scour.
I hate that. I really hate that. I hate the fact that you have to join Publishers Marketplace and you have to join all the places to find out about, you know, who's actually had a sale. Because another thing I want to be careful of is, you know what they call schmagents and all that? Who's actually had a sale in my genre? I want to make sure that I go with an agent who's sold a project in traditional mystery. And boy, the only way you can find it is to spend the money and have this membership and that membership and the other membership. And that really rubs me the wrong way. I don't like any kind of thing like that. That means, so if I can't afford to do that, I just hate that. Anyway, I hate everything about that. I wish that was public knowledge, but it's public knowledge if you pay the money.
It is. You know, that is something, you know, again, we've talked earlier about how the socioeconomic differences make a big difference. The thing that surprised me the most is actually how exclusive publishing, especially traditional publishing, is for folks who struggle financially. And especially for folks who, it's one thing to be poor in America. It's another thing to be poor in another country and not have access to libraries or the things that we take for granted.
Internet.
Oh, internet. Exactly. 100%. The access thing is a problem. And I'm just going to say it for the record here. That is part of the reason that diversity in publishing is so important. And part of the reason it isn't happening is because people that look like me and have backgrounds like me had families that could afford to let me live in New York to do the internships to get those jobs that then hire more people that look like me. So just so we're putting that out there, that is how that cycle loop continues.
Thank you for saying that, because hashtag own voices is great, but there's some fundamentals that need to be filled in first. And
100%.
people go, oh, internet access. There is not internet access in parts of Ireland today, right now, today, 2021. No internet access or dial-up internet access. And so, and it's cute to go to the library. But when you live in a country that's mostly rural, going to the library could be an hour in each direction. It could be more.
What's the best money you've ever spent as a writer? I need to ask that.
The best money I've ever spent as a writer is a really good question.
Sure.
Good pens.
Really?
So I like to start every first draft longhand. I added that for my main character too in my murder mystery. She does that too. I like to take notes longhand sometimes because visually it helps me to maybe construct a scene or to figure out where to place the details sometimes as I'm thinking about, okay, this needs to happen in the murder mystery. Where should I put it?
Your first drafts are always handwritten?
Not entirely, but in chunks, yes. Because I am that person who's sitting in bed at midnight writing on a napkin or whatever little scrap of paper is near me. I'm very like that. Living with me, I often wonder, like, what if you talk to my family, what living with me is like, because I am the person who in the middle of dinner just kind of goes off into my own world and I start scribbling down notes as soon as I think of them, because otherwise I'll forget. And I use my phone like everybody. I use notes on my phone, but I do there is something special for me about the connection of pen and paper and kind of seeing it. Yes!
For you, what does literary success look like, or have you already achieved it?
And I think literary success for me, I'm not really into fame. In fact, the idea of that horrifies me because I'm an introverted introvert, if you know what I mean. I'm off on there's the scale, and then I'm over the edge and down around the block of introversion. I'm going to have to rest after this for weeks. Alone in a quiet, dark room. So what does success mean? It's definitely not fame. I am interested I started saying this on Instagram and I was very trepidatious about saying it at first, but I found it very freeing. And here is my mission. Literary success looks for me like empowering women. And what I mean by that is I want to show womanhood in all that it is. It ain't just Barbie, and it ain't just being an object, and it's not just being adjacent to someone, okay? So most of the characters in the first murder mystery are female, but they're no two alike. And they do all sorts of things and have all sorts of motivations and all sorts of lifestyles, just like real people. Nuance. We're all different, right? I'm very different from someone who may look like me, talk like me, whatever. And I like that. Now, since reading Octavia Butler's work, some of which is sci-fi, some of which is Afrofuturism, which is a subgenre of sci-fi, but can also be a little different, and some of which is actually fantasy. She felt this particular work was fantasy. So after reading her work, it has compelled me to push farther, to go harder, to take what I thought was possible in literary work and expand it and then multiply it.
I love that that's success for you, because I think that goal of, my goal is so yours is for feminism. Mine is I want readers that were like me. I want a gay kid somewhere in rural Missouri where I grew up to be able to have access to stories that are led by characters that remind them of them, even if they don't quite look like them. Because
representation.
It's important that my characters not look like where I grew up, because that is not reality. That's my purpose, right? So I think it's interesting that we both have found it's a similar track, of my goal really isn't money or fame or those things, whatever. That is, definitely not money for anybody who's becoming a writer.
Definitely not.
Let me burst your bubble now. But I love that, because it means there's a purpose and a passion behind it. And I bet it will stay with you the rest of your life. And I love that. So for you, what was the book from childhood that turned you into a reader?
This is going to be a lot to take in. The Diary of Anne Frank.
Really?
Really and truly, the idea that she could be young and be a writer, the idea that she could be a young female and have a voice worth listening to, worth publishing, that voice could live beyond her and convey a message was incredible to me, changed my life. I was a voracious reader as a kid, but that book. So that book meant so much to me that I ended up, let's say, borrowing it without permission from my school library. I replaced it later, but like 5 years ago, I replaced it.
Yeah.
But anyway, but that book just meant so much to me. That and then Nancy Drew. I read Nancy Drew.
Are you ready for the best part?
Okay.
Today.
Let's go.
Okay, we're going to do some rapid fires, and I am going to just turn the screen to you and ask the questions. So,
okay.
Are you ready, my friend?
I'm ready.
First question, what is your best virtue?
Loyalty.
What is your latest obsession?
Octavia Butler.
What was the last book you loved?
Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler.
What is your favorite word?
Lovely.
What would be your favorite curse word?
I don't know.
Okay, that's okay. What annoys you the most?
What annoys me the most?
Mm-hmm.
Intolerance and impatience.
I like those answers. What sin are you most likely to forgive?
Gluttony? I guess.
That's always the one I'm willing to forgive. What sin are you most likely to be guilty of?
Oh, gluttony.
Oh, yeah. We would be fast friends in real life as well. What can always bring a smile to your face?
So many things. Little birds, flowers, kind words.
Where else would you live besides Ireland and the United States?
Oh, I don't think right now I would live anywhere other than Ireland, anywhere in the world other than Ireland at the moment.
Where are you the happiest?
At home.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Is teleportation a proper superpower? Teleportation all day.
Me too. I never want to get on an airplane again. If you could meet any author, dead or alive, who would you want to have dinner with?
Octavia Butler, Octavia Butler, Octavia Butler.
What traits do you admire most in friends?
Kindness, honesty, gentleness, patience, generosity of spirit.
Love those answers. And your last one, what trait would friends say they admire most about you?
Loyalty and fierce loyalty. And I would say generosity of spirit.
Last few questions. Do you read your own book reviews, and what are your feelings on authors in the review space?
Okay. I have really strong opinions about this, okay?
Take it away.
Listen up, authors. Reviews are not for you. Don't read them. Don't read them. There's nothing to be gained. Don't read them. They're not for you. They're for readers. Just let that rest. I really think that reviews and reading reviews can be detrimental to writers in a way that is not healthy or productive. I don't think there's much to gain.
For yourself, for your first book, self-published, what was your most effective form of marketing for that book?
Okay, this was a surprise.
Friends, you know what I mean? Like, I want to give them an insight to like what worked.
Yeah, this was a real surprise. I thought, I was on Instagram. I was very active. And I don't think I sold a lot of books through Instagram at all, even for a great deal of effort and an okay amount of followers. But
yeah, you have a great following.
I wrote an article for Mystery Journal International.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was, but I sold a ton of books after that came out. Like there was a real whoosh, which was very, very interesting. But I guess, it was an issue about Ireland, and the article that I wrote in the Mystery International Journal, Mystery Readers International Journal, that's the name of it, was about Ireland. And I basically wrote an article that said, that the Ireland that you know from movies and books is a fiction and does not exist and is not related to the real Ireland. And they placed me, I think they liked my article, or they liked what I had to say anyway, and they placed me first. I was the very first article you came to. So even if you just opened up that issue, there I was.
Yeah.
And I got very lucky because another person who wrote an article for that very same edition was another author who lives on this very island, and her name is Tana French.
Oh, wow.
She's a giant mystery writer star.
Yeah, I know.
So probably more people picked it up because she was in it. But then, and then there I am at the beginning, which, the best things happen like that through happenstance, through luck, through just trying everything and seeing what lands. And that was my absolute best. And so I encourage people, it's great to be on Instagram, be on Twitter. Absolutely. People need to kind of know a little bit about who you are to connect with you. That's great. But also try, if you can, to write articles in publications, in magazines, online, wherever you can.
What is the most unethical practice in publishing today?
Oh, I have so much to say, but I'll keep it brief.
Take it away. No, take it away. I'm giving you full screen.
Okay. This whole thing about you wrote a beautiful book. It's a beautiful plot. It's innovative. It's interesting. It's well crafted. It has beautiful words, beautiful sentences, beautiful paragraphs. But we're not going to buy it because it's not what's selling. What? This will have longer term repercussions, because if we're not going to publish books that are beautiful, we're not going to publish books that stand the test of time. This idea of publishing what is selling is very much related to today, and only today. It's very short-sighted.
What advice would you want to give a new writer?
Keep writing, keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. Writing is kind of sacred. And I think in the beginning, please understand that, like any good pursuit, it will take time to develop the craft. The only way to develop your craft is to keep writing and to keep reading. Read widely, read voraciously. Try occasionally to read a book you think you won't like. It's very informative to see if that's true, but also to find out why. What don't I like about it? What in particular?
My last question for you before I wrap things up: what are the most common traps that you see new authors fall into that you would want to say, be careful of?
I love you. You're great. Keep writing. Your first book is an exercise. It's practice. It may not end up being publishable, and that's okay. Don't pin all your hopes and dreams on one book. You're more than that. You have more ideas than that. You have more capacity than that. So your first book, write it. Do the very best you can. Learn everything you can. If you want to, try to query it, go ahead. If you want to try to publish it, do whatever you want to do. But just know that, like everything, you'll get better and better the more you write and the more you read. So keep going, keep writing, keep reading, avoid your reviews, avoid them actively. Keep going. You can do it.
Oh, I love that feedback. Well, Robin, I cannot thank you enough for joining me. You were so gracious in giving me your time. I don't even know what time where you are, but you were kind enough to give me so much of it. I cannot thank you enough. For everyone out there, I appreciate you hanging with us. And if you have additional questions for Robin, please follow her over on Instagram and Twitter at RobinCastle55, and be sure and connect with her there. And I will also link to the podcast below. Be sure and check that out. And if you have not already, check out her book. It is a great read. And do not forget, authors live on reviews. So once you read the book, please review the book. And I appreciate you for doing it. Thank you, Robin, so much for your time.